Hello and welcome to In the Spotlight with Quocirca, the definitive podcast on digital disruption in the print industry. I'm Louella Fernandes, CEO of Quocirca, and we're pleased to be celebrating 5 years of our podcast. We've got some great guests lined up for this series, and today I'm joined by Kevin Pickhardt, Executive Chairman at Pharos Systems. We'll be discussing why 2026 is set to be the tipping point for enterprise cloud print modernisation. So welcome to the show, Kevin.
Thanks, Louella, and congratulations on the 5 years.
So last year, Quocirca spoke with Josh Oram, CEO of Pharos Systems, about the company's growing support of enterprises migrating to cloud print services. So Kevin, can you introduce Pharos to our listeners and tell us a bit more about your role and the company?
So Pharos is an enterprise print management software and services company. We've got a long history, 34 years of innovation. We pioneered pull printing, hard to believe, pull printing, secure printing over 30 years ago now. So that has been in the industry for more than 30 years. Enterprise print management, the analytics and control and support of managing print and enterprise has been around for 20 years. And we've been in the cloud for 10 years. So, and then as you discussed last year, most recently in the last few years, we've introduced what we believe is the next generation of print services, what we're calling PrintOps, which, as you mentioned, it's a modern, it's a cloud native, user-centric approach to how we look at, or how enterprises look at, supporting printing and all of the operations around it. So yeah, we help enterprises modernize their printing infrastructure, and I'm thrilled to be here with you today.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. And yeah, it's always really interesting to me to know that you pioneered pull printing all those years ago and even moved into the cloud, probably further ahead of some of the other vendors in this space. So thanks for sharing that. So last year we talked about the emerging market category that Pharos has developed around PrintOps, and really a new definition in terms of how you look at cloud and your customers and the market. How has your knowledge and experience grown in the past year related to the PrintOps concept?
So we continue to see this category expanding and emerging. When you think about it, managed print services has been around for decades. Right? The services around managing the physical devices themselves. As I mentioned before, Pharos and this whole print management market, managing how users print and visibility around the analytics of print, has been around for more than 20 years. But neither of those really get into the nature of the print infrastructure itself. They tend to run on top of that print infrastructure. And what we're seeing inside of, and by print infrastructure, I'm talking about the print drivers, the print queues, the print servers that are maintained in an organization, the plumbing basically of how print works. But what we see with cloud adoption and this PrintOps space is it's about changing that. It is about this infrastructure that sits behind print, not just eliminating the infrastructure and moving into the cloud, but building all of the management tools, measurement tools, self-learning tools, continuous integration, continuous development tools that we expect with the cloud, building all of that into modernizing a print operation. So that's what we see with PrintOps, and we continue to see that emerging. One quick example of how this fits: we work with a global bank, and to give you a sense of the difference between what in today's market and where we see this PrintOps going. Last year, this global bank that we've supported for years and years and years ended up finding themselves on an obsoleting operating system for their print servers. They viewed the change of those print servers as so disruptive, so large, that they ended up paying Microsoft to extend support on an obsolete operating system, millions of dollars for Microsoft to support this obsolete operating system, rather than go through the process of shifting over hundreds of print servers. If we contrast that with the cloud, last year, Pharos had 287 production upgrades of our cloud software. We're upgrading the software more than once a day. That's the difference between what we see in the cloud world and what we see in this on-premises world. And as you mentioned at the onset, we see 2026 as kind of a tipping point in this emerging industry or emerging space.
Yes, I think the PrintOps approach is a really interesting model because, as you say, with the IT infrastructure, that's quite a well accepted approach in terms of how the operations of the IT environment works. And I think that bringing print management into that makes sense, that you have more of an integrated platform for the whole enterprise. And I know that example is really interesting as well, because it just shows how Pharos is very much tied into those larger enterprise and more complex environments, which we'll come to a bit more later in the conversation. So in terms of the changes that you've seen over the last 12 months, clearly there's been a really sort of acceleration towards cloud driven by AI, and the different cybersecurity concerns as well. Could you talk a bit about what you've seen in terms of your customers and what's really driving that shift amongst your customers?
Yeah, and I think it's been a long-term understanding that it's not, sort of most of our enterprise customers, is not whether their infrastructure and print infrastructure is going to move to the cloud. It's when, right? And they've adopted that, and the question has been when. And for many organizations, they've been pushing that off. But as you've mentioned, several different trends are shifting that and making this why we would look at this as a tipping point in the last 12 months. One global information technology company that we work with had a large security initiative. And as they dug into that security initiative and looked at implementing essentially zero trust principles throughout all of their infrastructure, they just recognized that print is not designed around zero trust. So as they started looking at modernizing their security framework, print became a standout issue for them. So they came to us with, we have an accelerated requirement to shift our infrastructure to the cloud. And it's not about print. This isn't print that's driving it, as you mentioned. In this case, it was security. Another one of our global banks, separate from the one I was mentioning before, recently introduced ARM technology to their executives. And as they were rolling out the ARM technology, they realized that the latest operating systems and work between Qualcomm and Microsoft in supporting ARM didn't carry forward support for legacy print drivers and the technology of legacy print drivers. They saw security issues. So they rolled out ARM technology and realized our executives can't print from this technology. So that started a whole sort of initiative around this upgrading of the infrastructure. And then we've got some clients that are just looking at, this is time for them to refresh their fleet. And when they look at refreshing their fleet, they don't want to do it on old technology. So security is paramount. Zero trust, OAuth, Windows protected print, technologies that are emerging around print security, as well as there's this changing world of user computing. AI, as you mentioned, you can't go anywhere without bumping into AI. And it's not just the AI, it's the nature of what users now expect. The level of integration, the level of information, the level of access that users expect is all expanding. So this user computing, the impact on how they get supported, it's all kind of coalescing around sort of the one key takeaway I would look at in this space, and that is that the print infrastructure has not changed dramatically in the last 20 years. The world around it has changed radically. And as you know, even in this space, print doesn't drive these different shifts and changes. It's a laggard. It follows these technology shifts. And it's just getting to the point where this old infrastructure and technology that's been around for years is just at the breaking point. And whether it's security, whether it's data, whether it's aging operating systems and support, we're just getting to the point where that world is breaking. And so we see that focus largely in the enterprises in which we're operating.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's a really good point you mentioned about print not keeping up or not keeping pace with the acceleration and all these other technologies in the adjacent IT environment. And I think one big change obviously has been Microsoft changing the kind of printing subsystem, where it's kind of completely re-engineered that. And as you mentioned, with Windows protected print and OAuth 2 as well as having an impact around security. And they're really making this huge push around security, and they have a huge influence on the market. And then also picking up on the ARM and AI PCs. I think it's leads quite nicely to my next question, is that print hasn't kept pace, but we're still seeing, in terms of Quocirca's research, that organizations still are heavily reliant on print, even if print volumes are flat to declining in some sectors. There are very few organizations that can say they're truly paperless. Is that something you're seeing at the moment? And what do you think is really driving those tipping points you mentioned in terms of, the shift to the cloud, AI, and so on?
Yeah. We work with a large consulting organization. I was talking with. We sit inside their user services, their IT group that focuses on all end user technology. He probably put it best because he's talking with me, and he supports all their operating systems, all the end user software systems, and print is among them. And he says, you know what, print is never strategic until it doesn't work. Then it becomes strategic very quickly. The phones ring like crazy. It's an expected service. And yes, you're right. Volumes have declined. We see them continuing to decline, but really kind of, from our standpoint, largely bottoming out. I think they may be on a slow decline, but it's not a cliff. It's not, people aren't getting rid of all of the printers in their infrastructure. They still see this as a requirement for workflow and for convenience for users. So I think we've shifted somewhat from this print as an absolute necessary day-to-day part of the operation to print as something like email. We see the rise of Teams and chat and different technologies for how we communicate with each other, but email still exists. Print will still exist, and every organization that we operate sees it as, it is something we need to support. It's just something we'd prefer that somebody else support for us, is where they're getting is. It's not where they want to put their focus, but they know they need it.
Absolutely. And I think, as you say, print is very much a utility for organizations today. They only notice when it doesn't work, and they expect it to work all the time. And I think this is the challenge for IT administrators as well as end users. It can be very frustrating. So, I think the role of companies like Pharos is to make that seamless and as flexible as possible. And it really goes back to this PrintOps approach as well. So in terms of some of the industry drivers you mentioned, so AI, cybersecurity, even hybrid work, that's obviously changed the way organizations are connecting and using print and scanning resources. What benefits are you seeing companies and your customers who are really embracing this new environment for printing? And, maybe you can also touch on the use of scanning, because what we're seeing as well is as print volumes are declining, scan volumes are increasing as well. And there's an even stronger need to secure the documents rather than the actual output on the device, but actually it at source. So
yeah, and I would say the same. It's scanning is a similar thing. If we look at it, it's how do people operate with paper, right? It's whether the paper is coming out and I'm using it for convenience or business process, or whether I'm looking at paper and saying data is on paper. I need to get it back into the system. Those are utilities that need to be supported. They need to be supported in this new cloud and emerging world. So we don't see something like scan going away either. And let's start. You were mentioning some of the shifts. Let's maybe start with AI, since it is absolutely so prevalent. And when you think about print, you don't necessarily think about AI and print. But what the AI shift and what this AI investment world has created is a changing expectation for how we operate with systems. And at the core of all of this is that systems are supposed to be smart, they're supposed to be connected, they're supposed to be proactive. Organizations, this is still astounding to me when we talk to organizations and enterprises, that very often they don't know that a printer is down until a user calls. And the user doesn't call until such time as every printer around them is down, because they don't like to deal with support systems. Very, very reactive process. In today's world, that is just not expected. It's expected that systems are communicating and interacting. Now, certain systems may know that printer is showing a sign of I'm out of paper, I've got a toner, I'm out of toner, or the system is down, it needs service. the issue is not necessarily that no systems understand that. It's how do those systems get integrated into the other systems that deal with proactive support services, systems like ServiceNow. So it is about the building of systems, the building of APIs, the collection of all the relevant data, and the ability for people to gather that data into places where AI can leverage it. It's the creation of these APIs, the collection of this data, making the data prevalent to the people who need to support that print environment. And that could be end users. It could be the deployment people who are trying to deploy new devices. How quickly can they deploy new devices? They don't want to jump from system to system. So smart identification and proactive identification of devices that are down, taking action if you can, rebooting those devices. Oftentimes a reboot fixes these things. You just need somebody to do it. AI systems are designed for that type of thing. So we're seeing organizations not so much looking at, I need AI in print now. They're looking at, how do I future-proof my entire organization? Print and print flow is one of those systems. How am I collecting the data, the telemetry data, not just did Louella print a document? What time did Louella submit the document? When did she swipe her card to get it? Where did the document go? What was the response time? Because those are the kinds of things that trigger support issues. So it's not just the data itself and the printer, it's the whole process and understanding, collecting. So yeah, it's about that AI. It's about security. You mentioned WPP, ARM being kind of an offshoot of that. Microsoft designing ARM with WPP out of the gate, Windows Protected Print, which fundamentally shifts how people print and changes what technology works. So yeah, this print space we see as playing its part in the IT fabric.
Absolutely. And I think, as you said, it's all about how customers can future-proof their enterprise systems. And I think what's a real sort of unique differentiator for Pharos is this integration that it offers with these APIs. Pharos is integrating with those existing AI platforms. And like you say, data is absolutely fundamental to understanding what's being printed by who and on what device. And that's always been the case with MPS, but I think it takes it another step forward, especially as the document is being scanned and the whole information workflow through organization.
And DLP is a security element inside of that, right? Not just is the document being printed, but do we have data loss protection on contents of documents before they are printed? So that is all about building the APIs and structuring the APIs such that these systems can integrate.
Yeah, and I guess I think, the one difference for companies like Pharos is that you're not tied into the hardware sales, I guess. So you can look at how to protect documents from even being printed for those reasons, that you actually identify classified or sensitive information and ensuring it doesn't get printed, which is, I think, what is important in this whole ecosystem about having devices that talk to the cloud and vice versa, to understand the actual importance of what that document is and where it sits in the workflow. So it's really interesting to understand how Pharos is positioning. And I know you've got a lot of enterprise customers, typically, I guess, who are operating a multi-vendor environment. Would you say that that's the case? And that brings more complexity as well?
Even the ones that say that they're single vendor are multi-vendor when you start moving into countries. They're a single vendor around the world, and then you go to India and find out it's different in India, or it's different in Japan, or Australia has a different contract. That's just the nature of dealing with these complex environments. So yeah, Pharos has been multi-vendor from the get-go. And we see this print infrastructure is really, it's not about tying to a specific vendor. It's about providing an infrastructure that allows all vendors to connect and operate as secured, managed endpoints.
Yeah, so it's great to understand a bit more about what industry drivers you are seeing that are really instigating this change in terms of the IT and print environment. So what's next for Pharos? Where is it heading, and what can we expect from Pharos in 2026?
So you will see continued growth in the breadth of features that we offer around how we deal with printing in the cloud. You'll see continued expansion of APIs and ties into to integrated systems. our focus, we had 5.9 uptime last year. Our focus is going to be to beyond 5.9 uptime last year. Our focus is to continue to do that. That's just an expectation that these things work, which means more APIs, more data, more openness to the data that we collect and offer, and continuing to build on our innovation around how we deal with print. We see a lot of change coming with, we've talked a little bit about it, the security of a Windows protected print, and organizations who are trying to adopt that. They have large, some of them thousands of print queues they need to migrate. We see ourselves building the tools to make that simple. How do we make print should be simple? It's not. How do we make it simple? And that's really our focus in 2026, is to continue to develop in that direction.
Yeah, so it sounds like expansion of APIs and integration with systems like ServiceNow, and using AI also to understand your customer's fleet. So I think it's worth highlighting here that Pharos does have a global customer base, and maybe you can talk a bit about the cloud platforms and in terms of the AWS data centers that you have across different regions.
Sure, and yeah, but by nature of our client base being global enterprises, we have to support globally. Our cloud is a global platform. We have integrated operations within Amazon at, I believe it's now at it's either 22 or 23 different data centers. So we recognize that organizations and enterprises want to keep the data both close for operational purposes, for compliance purposes, for security purposes. So our need to build a platform that operates multilingual, calls different languages across the suite of regions, 22 different regions, collecting all of that data and making sure that we adhere to our enterprise's operational needs, compliance needs, and security needs. So yes, Pharos is a global platform, and we view our cloud as a global offering.
Yes, so one thing we do see with our research is that there's still some reluctance for some organizations to move to the cloud. So we're still seeing that hybrid cloud is more prevalent because of concerns around data security and so on. But equally, those organizations who have made the move to the cloud have made so many benefits from modernizing their cloud environment. So what would be your number one, or maybe a few recommendations for organizations who have perhaps considered cloud modernization but haven't quite yet pulled the trigger to get started?
Yeah, it's a good question, and this really gets all at the core of change. And people don't like change; they fear change. In general, people don't want to change what's not broken, and oftentimes people look at print and say, "Well, we don't necessarily like it. It's not exactly broken, so we're not going to change it." But as we've talked about today, it's going to break. The infrastructure just cannot hold in the nature of what the speed of the changing IT. And the issue is, how do we get out ahead of having it break? We don't want more organizations like the bank that I talked about introducing technology only to find out print stops. Right? That's not the way you want to initiate a global migration or modernization initiative. So it really starts with learning and recognizing people don't need to solve this problem on their own. There are others that have come before them. Listening to podcasts like yours to understand what's out there, how are people thinking about it, and from my standpoint. Number one, if you believe that your organization is moving its infrastructure into the cloud at some point, then I think it's incumbent upon you to, number one, learn. If we can get our thinking right, how do we think about the problem? How do we think about what print is going to be, the vision of where we're going to go? Then the next steps become a little bit clearer. So oftentimes it starts with just getting a conversation going, like the one that we're having here. How do I get my thinking right? How do I get my plan and vision right? And then it's just a matter of taking the steps. It doesn't need to be rocket science. The beauty of the cloud is it's not rocket science. Somebody else is handling the complexity for you. You just need to make sure that you can handle the process and make sure that it's the right set of tools for you to begin to migrate and connect all of your endpoints. But it starts with getting your thinking right.
Yeah, I think it's so true, isn't it? There is this fear of change when it comes to printing, and we do see that organizations do have these barriers to cloud adoption, and also some concerns sometimes about feature parity with between on-premise print management platforms that they may be using and moving to the cloud. But I know from our previous conversation that Pharos Blueprint does offer feature parity with the cloud version.
Yes, it does. The cloud has now, and in some cases, surpassed our on-premises software and technology. We've talked about this a little bit in the past, but there's a couple ways of moving to the cloud. One is to take your on-premises technology and move it up to the cloud. That's not necessarily the right direction from our perspective, because building for the cloud is fundamentally different. From our perspective, we did the reverse. We built a clean sheet cloud platform built on cloud technologies, and then we've taken components of our cloud platform and reverse migrated them into our on-premises platform. So we try to make this transition as easy as is possible. So today people can operate in a hybrid world. It's not about I go home on Friday and I'm running the cloud on Monday. We recognize that enterprises take time. So feature parity is important, and not just feature parity, but technology integration such that your users, and in the case of Blueprint users, they won't notice a difference when they move to the cloud. What they're using at their desktop, what they're using at their printers is identical technology, identical software. It's the whole back-end information that becomes different and supported when you move to the cloud.
Yeah, so thanks so much, Kevin, for explaining what Pharos is doing now, the PrintOps approach, what it's doing in the future around cloud, and how it's helping its customers modernize their print environment. It's very clear that the pace of change is only going to get faster, and it sounds like the best approach for organizations is to speak to a company like Pharos about evaluating their current architecture when it comes to print and how they can future-proof that print environment for a cloud-first AI era. So thanks again for joining me. It was a great conversation, and look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Likewise, Louella. Thank you, and congratulations again on 5 years. You've seen a lot of change in the last 5 years.
So thank you for joining today's episode of In the Spotlight with Quocirca. For more information, please visit quocirca.com and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks again for joining, and I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.